Good day everyone, I am Michael, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Public-Private Partnership P3 projects. What are they and how do they work? I would like to introduce our presenter for today, James G. Jack, and I would like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, James.
All righty, thank you, Michael. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, to our discussion today on P3 projects, public-private partnership projects. What are they? How do they work? As Michael said, my name is Jim Zack. I'm the principal of James Zack Consulting. Purpose and introduction. I want to explore various aspects of P3 projects. In looking at the studies and focusing on the P3s that didn't work, how risk should be assessed, managed, and allocated. So the presentation is going to address, number one, determine what exactly is a P3 project, and then try and identify some inappropriate risk allocation. So let's start with, what is a P3 project? P3 projects are not new, and they were not created in the United States by any stretch of the imagination, but they were not as widely used as we're looking at today. What is a P3 project? Well, there's two definitions I want to give you from two different studies that we found that seem to summarize it well. Number one, the first definition, it's a contractual arrangement between a public agency, a public owner, and a private sector entity. The other definition is a little more discreet. They say it's a contractual arrangement formed between public and private sector partners, which includes the private sector financing and allows for more private sector participation than what is traditional in other forms of project delivery. How are P3 projects used? Well, P3 projects may be used to construct or develop a wide range of physical or social infrastructure projects. And now, having said this and looking at a bunch of other studies, the commonalities amongst almost all the P3 studies that we looked at are the following. So some characteristics of P3 projects. All project phases are bundled into a single contract. Typically, P3 projects are very complex, and it's like the complexity justifies the use of a P3 project delivery method. There must be reliable revenue sources. P3s tend to have a reliable revenue source already. There's a reasonable or a high degree of risk allocated to the contractor, and it's a higher level of risk than is typical on other project delivery methods. Payment upon delivery is not uncommon in some P3 projects. Now, there are a bunch of misconceptions about P3 projects that I've run across on the jobs I've been involved in reading the studies or when I've been speaking at conferences. So, number one, we were looking into using P3 because we think it saves money. Well, the answer is no. P3 projects do not necessarily save money. The following factors are absolutely necessary. An appropriate legal and institutional framework. Many owners, however, include contract clauses to prevent what they consider excessive profit. The last misconception that I've been faced with multiple times is, well, P3 projects are simply a mechanism to outsource public services. To some extent, I guess that's a reality, but it's not outsourcing forever. Let's take a look at the structure of P3 projects. There's a wide variety of P3 projects driven by different factors. The scope of work is the first one. The services that the P3 contractor is being contracted to perform. Design, construction, financing, operation, maintenance, whatever. There are 13 different ways to structure P3s. Design build, which is probably one of the simplest. Build, transfer, and then operate. Build, own, operate, and transfer. And it goes down to the last one is just a concession. There's only 3 ways to structure the payments. There's availability-based payments. There's the shadow toll-based payments, and then there's user fee payments. Why do owners employ P3 projects? Anticipated or estimated cost savings. Another study listed 12 perceived benefits. Risks and activities assumed by the private party. So with this in mind, what do bidders look at? Or what do they look for in P3 projects? Well, studies show, number one, return on investment. Reasonable time frames. Number one, the duration of the design and construction. When does this project have to be complete and ready for use? Risk allocation. Let's take a look at how risk has been allocated in a number of P3 projects that we identified. In traditional design-build projects, owners often try to transfer as much risk as possible to contractors. Each risk has to be objectively identified, reviewed, and a decision made for what to do with the risk. If owner simply transfer as much risk as possible to P3 contracts, risk allocation is at the core of P3 projects during the negotiation phases and during the project. Some of the risks that we looked at, construction risk. Well, there's 19 construction risks on this slide. Legal and economic risks. Operations risk, there's 12 risks here. Market and project selection risk. Relationship risk, project finance, and what they call natural risks. Typical risk, process, identify all risks, analyze each one to determine the probability. Financing risks, vehicle supply risks, operation cost overruns, for example, in this one. Summary, a survey of 285 professionals interested in or experienced with P3 projects, looking at the 46 risks that are listed here. Some inappropriate risk allocation clauses. As we've said several times, risk should be allocated to the party best able to manage the risk if it arises. Some more discrete ones that I'm starting to see in P3 contracts, defining concurrent delay as contractor clause delay. Let's take a look at typical causes of project failure on P3 jobs. Poor legal framework and enforcement. The rules of the road are not specified or not particularly well specified in the job. Failure to establish strong institutional arrangements. The last part here, keys to successfully managing P3 projects. This first study was done by the National Council for Public-Private Partnerships. Now, this is an organization formed by mainly by contractors who do P3 jobs to try and promote the use of P3s. Urban Land Institute. Now, this is the framework. It's a risk and rewards balance sheet. Conclusion. P3 projects are becoming more common. Project delivery method of choice for every project going forward, but they're becoming more common. If P3 projects are properly structured, they're likely to be very successful. Identification, allocation, and management of risk will affect project success and bankability. It'll make a difference in value for money, which is necessary to get the financing for the P3. Owners, you have to recognize risk allocation is not the only driver of P3 project success. Provided all of these are done correctly by both the owner and the P3 contract. Well, on behalf of the Construction Forum and myself, I want to thank you for taking the time to attend the webinar. Again, I thank you for attending. I hope you found the material worthwhile and the time spent useful.
Thank you, James. So that does conclude the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.